The numbers aren't great right now. And that's been going on for, close to a month or so at this point, whether that's from Thanksgiving events or people relaxing their social distancing and mask efforts. I can't speculate on that. But clearly the numbers are not great right now. And I think the guess is they probably won't be great for the next couple weeks or a month, with the Christmas gatherings and New Year's, and if people aren't following the suggestions, the guidelines that they should be doing.
How do we compare to the rest of the Eastern Shore in terms of this kind of data?
So right now, all the midshore counties are over the 5% sort of standard or threshold for the 7-day average positivity rate.
Mm-hmm.
Talbot's at 9.25 today for the 7-day moving average. Number of cases were on the lower side. Mm-hmm. For the midshore, Talbot County is. If you look at it on a per capita basis, the cases per 100,000 population, and are also on the lower side as far as the deaths per capita.
It'd be interesting to get your impressions of how Talbot County handled this pandemic. You've been watching it for a long time as a reporter. What are your takeaways as you look at 2020?
I would say Talbot County has done a pretty outstanding job as far as getting information out to the public, keeping the numbers down as best they could. And I think probably the citizens have done a good job in following the guidelines and doing what they need to do with social distancing and wearing masks. I know Talbot County, we started running this graphic in our daily COVID-19 update, but they do a graphic every day which has the number of new cases for that day, and I think they've added some things over the weeks. They've got the daily new cases per 100,000 population, 7-day moving average of that. So in some ways, on things like that, they've probably done a better job than most of the surrounding counties. I would say Dr. Wadley, Dr. Frederick Wadley, who was the Talbot County health officer, did an outstanding job, I believe, and the county staff, the county manager, and Clay Stamp, Director of Emergency Services, who's now the county manager, really staying on top of things and getting that information out to the public directly through their social media and through the media, such as the Talbot's By.
I'd be interested in getting your take on how the county responded to Black Lives Matter, and of course you can't talk about Black Lives Matter without talking about the Talbot Boys, so maybe a little bit of both.
Sure. I mean, those kind of got tied together this year in Talbot County with the Confederate Monument there on the courthouse green. Black Lives Matter, I think the county has, I don't know if they've responded a whole lot to that. Council President Pack, did put some effort forth. They did draft and approve a diversity statement for the employee handbook. There was, disappointingly, there was, some objection to that from one or more council members early on, when he first brought that up. But clearly that's something that any business of any size needs to have a statement like that. They need to be addressing diversity and inherent bias, and if there's any systemic racism in the county or in the state or in the nation. I mean, it's something that has to be addressed. With the Confederate statue, obviously there was another 3-2 vote to maintain it. I think my disappointment with the county council at this point is what they've done as far as not agreeing to meet with the NAACP and a group of religious leaders, in a group setting, work session type setting, to talk about the Confederate monument that's there right outside the circuit courthouse doors, but just have individual meetings. And I think they really should have that discussion and listen to members of the NAACP, listen to members of the religious community, the faith leaders, and just understand where they're coming from.
I should back up a little bit. I mean, it's rare that your community gets to be front and center in a New Yorker article. Did you
Sure.
did you read that story?
Casey Sepp, yes.
Yeah.
Right, and she, yes, she's an Easton High grad, Rhodes Scholar, as of I remember. I mildly had the privilege of seeing her grow up. I worked part-time for many years at a grocery store, and her father worked at one of the other locations, but they lived in Talbot County, so they would come shopping at her store. And their parents were always proud of Casey and her sister. But yes, she's an incredible writer, and her take on the whole controversy over the Confederate Monument was interesting.
Do you think she got it right?
I'm trying to think back to what her conclusion was, but I think for the most part, I agreed with her. One thing, it's interesting. One thing that hasn't come up a whole lot during this discussion and all the commentary and comments on social media, on Facebook, is just how slim a margin it was that the county council actually voted to allow the Frederick Douglass statue years ago. I think I want to say 2004, but don't hold me to that. But it was close. It was down to the wire. Like the day of the vote, I think most people might have rated it 50-50 or leaned to them not approving it. There was opposition to allowing a statue to Douglass on the courthouse greens. There was the unwritten policy that it was reserved for war veterans. At that point we had the Confederate statue and we had the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. But I think the argument prevailed that the courthouse green should be for people from Talbot County who made a difference, who made history, and certainly no one has made a greater difference and has progressed so far as Frederick Douglass, going from a slave to a world famous orator and everything else he did. So they made the right decision. But people try to say that Douglass is, having Douglass there counterbalances the Confederate statue, and that wasn't the point at all. The point was to honor someone of the stature of Frederick Douglass, who was born and raised in Talbot County, and he should be honored in Talbot County, and he should be honored on the courthouse green. But that has sort of been forgotten, how difficult it was to even get that approved, not even 20 years ago.
When you look at 2021, do you see any activity related to the statute that would take place? Is there a door opening for the council to reconsider their decision? What's the status right now?
I mean, any council member could introduce a resolution again to have it removed. I think it's clear right now we're at a 3-2 split. So I don't know if anyone would even bother to try to push that issue right now. But I think having those discussions, whether it's a group discussion, which I think they should have with groups, or individual discussions out in the community. And, if we can get some better sense of the reason why these men fought for whichever side, I think that could lead to a better discussion of whether it's appropriate to have the statue there where it is.
Yeah. John, what are the other things that you noticed over 2020 that we could talk about?
I think one of the other big ones for Talbot County, and I'm trying to find the story to get the numbers right, but it was the first time in decades that Talbot County voted for a Democrat for president. So the question there is, to what extent is that a party issue, or to what extent is that just an issue of the candidate for the Republicans being Donald Trump? I mean, we don't do exit polls or things like that, so we have no real clear idea. I would say it's, my guess would be it's the difference between a more traditional Republican who may have decided that President Trump wasn't who they wanted to keep as president, and the Republicans who, completely and wholeheartedly supported President Trump. I know the Democrats did up their registration game. And I think it's always great, if we can get more people registered to vote, if we get more people out to vote, clearly it's a better, better outcome, more reflects what the populace really wants.
Must be said, I think it was 16 vote difference, but
right. It was very slim.
But given the rest of the Eastern Shore, it was only, once again, Kent County and Talbot County that
Sure.
voted for the Democrat. And we had seen this with the Jesse Colvin campaign 2 years before that.
Sure.
Where Congressman Harris lost those areas. But it is something to watch. I wish we could figure this out. I know that we have a lot of retirement folks in our communities, and they may be coming from those suburbs that also changed
Right.
party lines. But it's kind of hard to tell on that. What else kind of struck you as interesting last year? I know we had a big issue, or somewhat of a big issue, on how the town was going to handle COVID, and whether or not there was an opportunity for a downtown promenade and all sorts of things. Town went through a little bit of a tussle over the promenade idea.
Sure, and that's has had some far-reaching effects. The promenade was proposed, largely by Discover Easton. It had some, prominent opposition. Possibly the town council moved that along too quickly. There wasn't enough discussion before, and they were trying to help restaurants out as quickly as they could. So I don't blame them for moving it quickly. I think, there's some thought that, what has occurred since then with Discover Easton and its funding being taken away by the town and funneled through the Easton Economic Development Corporation, that's sort of tied in with that brouhaha over the promenade and some of the opposition, some of the people that were opposed to the promenade. The town has said that's not the case. They were going to have all that economic development and tourism and marketing and event money funnel through one organization. The timing kind of makes you question that, but you to some extent you have to accept what they say. But certainly, that's will be something to follow going forward. How does an organization that's been more focused on economic development sort of pick up the reins for the marketing and event side that was being handled by Discover Easton. How do we get that all under one organization and do it all effectively? So we'll have to see how that goes. So the big question we're getting now from our readers is about the vaccines. So certainly that's something we'll be looking into. There is a little bit of data on the state website, so we'll be compiling that and getting that out to our readers. They are listing the number of vaccinations by region. So right now, actually, the Eastern Shore, the full shore, we've had about 1% of the population has been vaccinated. I think that was the highest of the 4 or 5 regions that they have listed. But the other ones are around, a little under 1%, but getting there. But obviously that number is going to change. And as we get the frontline, as the state gets the frontline healthcare workers, they'll move on to the next phase. And then the third phase would be the general public.